Well, welcome everybody to the Boston Office 365 user group. It's great to see everybody in the room and online. Just a reminder, this is being recorded, so make sure you to mute yourself and come off mute if you want to say anything. Also, mute your camera too if you're not speaking. So you can reach us online at YouTube, Meetup, and LinkedIn. Tonight with us is Dimitri, who's a co-founder of the user group Boston 365, and here tonight and will be presenting. Also an organizer, I'm Bill Gunning. So Dimitri's with Turn Digital Partners, also our premium sponsor. I work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I'm one of their technical leads, working in Power Platforms, Power BI, and the M365 space. Tonight's agenda, we'll be going through Microsoft 365 updates, kind of to review where we left off on last meeting. Every meeting we try to do a couple updates on the changes and what's been happening to the cloud tenant and Microsoft. Also, the sponsor highlights. We also have featured speaker tonight, Dimitri, which I mentioned, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A session, community chat events. Feel free to chat online if you have any questions. Don't hesitate to do a chat or come off mute if you have any questions. And then we'll go over additional events. People in the room will be having a raffle and a mingle afterwards. Previous session, advanced list formatting. I just uploaded this video. It already has a lot of hits, a lot of views. Really worth it. About 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Please take a look at it. Chris goes over not only how to format JSON columns and lists and views and cards, he has a lot of tricks and techniques just on how to hack the URL and change how you view it. So it's really worth it. Take a look and pause. I had to pause quite a bit on how to pick up little tidbits. So take a look at that video. It's online. Office 365 updates from where we left off last time. One of the new features, I was looking at this today, cross-tenant identity synchronization. This is really interesting. It'll take your internal users and it'll sync it to become an external user on the target tenant. So it's really designed for organizations that own multiple tenants. It's not designed to go across organizational boundaries. So if you own and manage multiple tenants, you have to do configuration in both tenants, and then your accounts will sync across. The really nice part of it, instead of just simplifying the guest invite and accept, it'll also allow you to manage what apps they get access to. So you can predetermine that. And I'm the government community cloud, the government tenant, and I cannot chat with people outside. But with this feature, if we own multiple tenants, we could chat across them. So great new feature to coming. Take a look at it. Again, it's designed for internal company owned. OneDrive Home, the new landing page. It hasn't changed for me yet, but this is a new feature coming out. Basically, it's a file view, the most recent files. It takes away your folders. So you can see the most recent files and updates. If you still want that classic OneDrive view, you just have to click on My Files in the tab up here. So you look for that change coming soon. I like it. Microsoft Teams, ultrasound howling detection. I love how they use that. When I first looked at this, I was thinking like, a wolf howling or something. So if you're in a room with multiple users and you're picking up, because things would be slightly delayed, and not only can you pick up that annoying noise, it could be other sounds and background noise. Microsoft's now going to detect those and mute and decide, which person to mute and unmute. You'll get a pop-up letting you know what's going on. You can still unmute yourself if you want to speak, so the microphone's closest to you, and Microsoft's going to hopefully manage this. It'll be interesting to see how this works. So look for that new feature. And Yammer, Microsoft is evolving Yammer into Viva Engage, rebranding it, renaming it. This change will happen. Read too much about this. Anything else on this one? Just rebranding. So recently on the Power Platform call, they were talking about Release Planner. So this is a new website, new to me. I don't know how long it's been out there. Planner shows Dynamics 365 and also Power Platform. So it shows you Power BI, Power Apps, and you can see what's going on with new features and releases and when they're happening. The nice thing is you can make notes and comments and share it with people. So anyways, it's my new best friend. A huge thank you to our platinum sponsor, Turn Digital, providing the food tonight and keeping the user group going and helping us with all our needs. So I just want to thank Turn Digital. And the main event tonight, top 50 Microsoft 365 features coming in 2023 by Dimitri.
Thank you, Bill. While switching over, if you guys have any questions along the way, please raise your hands in the room or online, put that into the chat, and Bill will be keeping a close eye on it. We have about 60 minutes, give or take, to get through 50 new features coming this year, which means we're going to be pretty fast paced and it's going to be a bit of rapid fire, but I don't want that to dissuade you from asking questions as you might have as we go along. Perfect. Perfect. So just a very brief intro. Many of you know me. For those that don't, I'm a partner at Turn Digital. I've been working with these technologies going back to SharePoint 2003 days, then VPOS, then O365, and been on top of the bandwagon ever since. So with that, I helped co-found this user group 6, 7, 8 years ago. May is going to be our anniversary, so I'm sure we'll plan something around that time frame. So today's agenda is going to cover a wide variety of different technologies within the M365 stack. So it was actually really hard to pick just the top 50 for this presentation. So I actually cheated. There's probably closer to 60 or so, but we'll go through these different categories. Quick disclaimer. So everything that you're about to see here is public information. This has been items that have been announced at the Ignite conference last October, November. This is from the tech community blog posts. It's from the public roadmap. It's from the message center updates. So you're not going to see anything that's under NDA. This is all readily available info. So let's dive in. So the first category is around Microsoft Syntex. So Microsoft Syntex is something that was rebranded from previously being called SharePoint Syntex. And it was introduced really as that AI engine to help do document processing and form creation. And Microsoft has basically taken this and taken all the AI elements that have been built as part of SharePoint Syntex and really made this a new brand name. It's a new umbrella term that's going to cover a lot of great functionality that we'll talk about here in just a minute. But this is really Microsoft taking AI and starting to interweave it into all sorts of different feature sets that touch all different parts of the Microsoft 365 platform. So the first feature that was announced was around bringing new syntax search capabilities directly into Microsoft 365 search. So with this, you can type in a question like you see in the example here, and using natural language processing, Microsoft will understand the intent of what you're looking for, and then try to deliver results that resolve your intent of what you're asking. The key here is that you might be looking for something that's related to, let's say, puppies, and your search term might never use the word puppy, but because of the context of what you're looking for, and Microsoft has semantic models to understand that you're talking about animals and this and that, they'll actually give you relevant results, even if the keywords aren't exactly matching what you're searching for. We have a question in the room.
Is this at all related to the integration of ChatGPT into the Bing search engine, or is it a totally separate?
That's a great question. So this has been in the works for a while, well before ChatGPT became what it is today. As we've all seen in the news, Microsoft has invested around $10 billion into the company that produced ChatGPT. And if you had a chance to watch the Ignite keynote last fall, I don't know if it's the founder, president, whoever it is of that company, actually had a one-on-one session with Satya during that. So I think there's been long-standing investments into these AI-based technologies. So now, is that directly a mirror of what's in Bing? Is it an offshoot? Is it something tangent? I don't know. But I'll tell you from my kind of just experience, there's a very different world between public internet search, things like Google and Bing, than enterprise search. The main thing is that the public web search doesn't have to be accurate, right? You can ask it, what is the best sushi restaurant in the city? And it will show you 10 sushi restaurants. But is it going to show you every single sushi restaurant in the city? Maybe, maybe not. Whereas with enterprise search, it's a lot more granular. You're looking for a piece of information. So traditionally, it's been different approaches behind the scenes. I am a CS major, and I actually took a really interesting course on how search engines are built. We actually built one as part of that process. And it was very interesting and eye-opening to see how this all kind of functions behind the scenes. So for that reason, I think it's tangentially related, but not a replica. Good question. Okay, let's keep moving forward. Microsoft is introducing a first-party e-signature functionality called Syntex e-signature. This is not intended to be a complete competitor to Adobe Sign or DocuSign. So it's intended to do quick, basic, we have something we need it to be signed off. With Adobe, you can send multiple complicated workflows of approvals. You can send different envelopes. You have all sorts of other advanced functionality that Microsoft is not going after, at least not at this stage. So this is a new feature that's becoming available. And one more thing to highlight around Microsoft Syntex is that previously under SharePoint Syntex, it was a per user per month license that would get you that document processing capabilities. They realized that this is going to create a pretty large barrier of entry for most companies. So they're shifting the entire model to pay as you go. I don't have the exact cost, but it might be something like 1 or 2 cents per page that gets e-signed or that gets scanned and understood and processed. So they're really lowering that bar of entry. And plus, you only pay what you use, which I think is a pretty fair way of doing it. Another pretty cool feature coming is syntax summarization. So this is using a lot of that AI engine to be able to go through and summarize documents for you. So this is especially helpful if you're working on an RFP response or if you have a legal contract or something where you need a quick summary of what it's about, so that you're in the know. And this same type of functionality is actually being tied into Teams that we'll talk a little bit further in this presentation about. Another related feature is syntax translation. So this will let you translate documents to a dozen different languages initially. Again, using language models and translation models that are available. There's also a ton of additional impacts happening here around just understanding of documents or files that are maybe not word-based. So things like scanning an image and understanding what's inside the image. So if somebody does a search, in my example, puppies, and there's a picture of a dog, that might be a relevant thing, even though nothing about that file name is related to what I'm searching for. Think of it also in terms of if you're looking for an invoice or a receipt, or you're looking for a specific name of something that where an OCR technology might be helpful in a non-traditional object. They'll be able to go through and index that and help you tie that back to your search. Another pretty cool feature is syntax annotations. So we'll now have the ability to go and mark up all sorts of different files, not just Office files. So if we want to add comments, draw circles, call things out, add in the future likely stamps and other things that other annotation tools have. So it gives you a pretty nice way to be able to do this without having to change the integrity of the underlying files.
Actually, could you explain that just a little bit more? Because it looks like it could be a good replacement for Please Review.
Yes, so this is not out yet, so we don't have more information beyond.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's going to be the case for most of what you see here today.
Gotcha.
Another feature coming is the content rules processor. So this will essentially let you have a document library where people can drop files. So maybe think of it coming from a scanner that's tied into a document library, or people are uploading it as part of a process. And then using Syntex, you can understand what kind of document it is as an example, and then maybe move it to a different site, a different library, attach additional metadata, attach a content type, kick off a workflow. And now, although you can do a lot of this stuff using Microsoft Flow, that interface is still a little bit overwhelming for your typical end user, whereas this is going to be a much simplified version, a little bit more limited, but also very powerful. Moving forward, so Syntex continues to have additional pre-built models. So today, if you're building a Syntex model, you have to upload 5 positives and several negatives. And then over time, the more you train it, the better it becomes. Microsoft is also doing that on a large scale on their side, and they're going to be publishing those models into your environments so that you don't need to reinvent what an invoice is or what a contract is and so forth. So as of today, contract managements are available and accounts payable solutions are coming fairly soon. Another really anticipated feature is the Syntex backup and restore. So there's plenty of third-party options available for backing up Office 365, but they're fairly slow. They don't have near instant access to your content, and you're paying a third party to host it, which has its pros as well as its cons. But the nice thing here is that this is going to be basically a block level copy on the back end. So this is going to be pretty lightning fast if you're taking a snapshot. And Microsoft hasn't released pricing or the actual mechanisms about it publicly yet, but expect more announcements of this to come in the coming months. All right, moving into the next topic around Microsoft Viva. So as Bill mentioned, as part of the updates, Viva Engage is now officially replacing the Yammer branding, and that's going to take place over the course of this year. But they've added another feature into Viva Engage that was not available in Yammer. So to take a step back, Viva Engage was released as a Teams application to access your Yammer content. And it was not being positioned as a separate product, it was being positioned as more of a new interface to get into Yammer. And with that, they've rolled out an additional feature on top of that interface called Storyline, which basically gives you these little icons at the top where you can click into, just like you can on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and basically see what somebody's working on. And this could be something like, we're doing a tour of our new production plant, and here's what we see. Or it could be, today, I'm feeling inspired and working on whatever they're working on. So this was announced before the more recent announcement that Yammer as a brand is going away and being replaced with Viva Engage. So presumably in the future, a lot of these other Viva Engage features would also be available through your typical Yammer and access points, meaning mobile, the web browser, and so forth. Just a quick show of hands. Is anybody using Yammer org-wide or Viva Engage? Okay.
We're too small to use Yammer. Is that going to be still the case with Viva Engage?
So what was that?
So we're too small of a company to use Yammer. Is that going to be the size of the company? Going to be, where it's been something to use Viva Engage?
Okay, great question. So for those on the call, the question is, if a company is too small today to use Yammer, will Viva Engage be more appealing to them? My answer is probably not fundamentally. I mean, if you look at Microsoft's kind of demarcation between Yammer versus Teams, Yammer is kind of for like the bigger, people at your work outside of your bubble. Teams is more inside your bubble. If you're a small org, you're probably not going to have much of an extensive bubble outside your teams. But that being said, there are some new features coming that are pretty cool that might be helpful, which will actually be my next slide here. So there's a Q&A feature that's called Answers. Very original. So this gives you the ability to ask questions, but more importantly, rather than just posting a question as free text, it also will then go and do a search of other questions that have been previously answered and try to use the AI search to give you a response back that that might be helpful or might not, and you can still post that question. So it's using a lot of that NLP, that natural language processing, to be able to go through and do that. Another feature that's coming into Viva Engage is called Leadership Corner. So this is kind of like a profile page, half blog, half ability to host, like Ask Me Anything type of events. Microsoft has moved blogging around several times within the M365 atmosphere. At one point, it was your My Sites before it was rebranded to OneDrive. Then there was your Delve posts that you could do, your Delve blog posts, and then that went away. And this is kind of the next iteration of doing so. I think it makes sense in a sense because, Viva Engage is supposed to be that social element of M365. So having profiles makes sense. But again, once this rolls out, we'll be kicking the tires and learning a little bit more about how it works. All right, next feature. So Viva Learning is a pretty great tool. It helps you aggregate different LMS sources together. It also lets you upload files into your SharePoint libraries and expose those as training modules or training features. And Microsoft is continuing to tie in all of the different Viva products together pretty well. So the latest feature is that you'll be able to have your Viva learning cards coming up in your Viva Connections dashboard. If we look at it over here, basically it's reminding you that you have a training that's due in 2 weeks. The little things like that will help keep people on track and hopefully reduce that report of people that are overdue on training. A bunch of new features coming to Viva Learning this year. This is not a comprehensive roadmap, but there's going to be additional things added with learning paths where if you have 4 or 5 unrelated trainings, but they're part of a similar type of curriculum, you can tie them together and basically put a lasso around that as a learning path where first you start to learn this, then you progress to the next stage. Then there's also learning collections, which is similar, but instead of a guided path, it's more of like, these are all the trainings that are tied to HR management, for example. All right, another feature that's coming with Viva Insights is the ability to schedule sending Teams chats during business hours of the recipient. You might have seen this in Outlook for some time now, where if you go to send an email to somebody and says, hey, do you want to delay this until 10 o'clock so that they get it at their 9 in the morning? And they don't think that they need to respond off hours. So similar functionality is coming to Teams messages. And I think this is actually more important than Outlook because email in general is seen as being more of passive, whereas Teams chats tend to be a little more urgent, a little bit more in the moment. So by being able to delay that, I think I equate Teams chats to like text messages. And if I'm not going to text a coworker at like 11 o'clock at night about something, I really shouldn't be sending them a Teams chat at that time. So this feature kind of helps hone everyone back together, and hopefully this reduces how much of that work-life balance become more of a challenge in the pandemic. Another pretty cool feature that's coming is around meeting effectiveness. I think we've all worked with people that abuse meetings. And this gives the organizers of meetings the ability to go and request feedback. And there are some parameters here in terms of, how many people need to be in a meeting before this becomes available, so you can't, figure out who's giving you negative feedback. But you can very easily ask questions like, what made this meeting a success? Or how would you rate the time spent? Or what could have made it better? And it has all these predefined things that are there, so you don't have to brainstorm your own Q&A for how good your meeting was. But this will give you like a pulse back to your meeting organizer to say, hey, this was a waste of everyone's time, 1 star, no tip, or if this was something that people found to be truly engaging. Another thing that's coming to help people focus and kind of get out of being in back-to-back meetings from sunrise to sunset is a new focus mode. And this basically lets you go and set a timer and says, okay, I'm going to focus for the next 60 minutes. And in doing so, it's going to set you to do not disturb. It's not going to deliver any Teams messages to you. It's going to suppress other noises and notifications if you're being mentioned in Teams channels and so forth. But more importantly, it also shows you a timer, so you know that you're kind of going to get in the zone and you're going to stay there. There's also tie-ins that are coming with other mindful break applications. The names escape me at the moment. Calm, I think, is one of them, and there's another one that's tied pretty closely into Viva Insights. But in any case, the intention here is that you put together mental breaks throughout your day, so you don't feel like you got hit by a train come 6 o'clock. So another feature that's coming is Viva Insights Praise. So this gives you the ability to go and basically send acknowledgments and praise to your colleagues. So someone does something nice for you, or they really kill it with a deliverable, you can send them like a good job, and that appears in their Insights dashboard.
Our tenant already has that. I'm just kind of curious of how many, if anybody's organizations actually use praise. I keep pushing it, nobody's grabbing it.
Yeah, so there's been multiple iterations of this feature. This is the latest iteration. I think a lot of times praise, if you look at other platforms that use like praise, environments, a lot of it's usually tied to other recognition beyond just sending a thank you. Yeah. So it might be like you get a certain number of points that you could then redeem for a gift card, or you get featured on the next town hall that, hey, great job to so-and-so, they received a ton of positive feedback on this thing they did. So that piece I think is still missing, but I think it's going to come as Microsoft develops and releases more and more APIs that tie into these things.
It's raised, Mike.
Looks like we have a question from Mike. Mike, you going to mute yourself?
Hey, I was just curious, how is this praise different from the previous iteration of praise? Because I'm not really seeing much difference here.
Smaller, and you can choose the background color.
Yeah, there's colors.
Great question, Mike. To be honest, there's a lot of overlap, but this is also tied into the whole Viva Insights structure. So I'm not sure if it's a different team at Microsoft behind it, which is a possibility, or perhaps there's just going to have more of a roadmap to it. But they wouldn't be making this announcement unless there's more coming behind it.
You missed the unicorn. The rainbow.
All right, another new feature coming around Viva Topics. Oh, we have one more question. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. So one thing I noticed with the praise, and especially in working in business for a long time, you need a core culture that believes in that. But what I would suggest for something like that would be fantastic is to higher up the leadership change, more notification to them like, hey, have you praised someone today? Because sometimes people need a reminder of that simple thing. We focus on the negative, but we don't always focus on the positive. That I think might be really good to incorporate in the future for that.
Excellent point, Steve. So moving on to the next feature. So there's a lot more metrics and adoption related criteria that's being released across all of M365. I'm not sure if anyone's gone into the usage analytics recently, but they've really expanded what's there natively. This is going to continue to feed into that. So this is around Viva Topics. And Viva Topics, for those unfamiliar, is the knowledge management platform that Microsoft has been building for many years. It used to be called Project Cortex at one point. Then it was branded as Viva Topics. And it's a great thing to be able to identify terms and find information across your entire sphere of M365 as it ties to specific experts on topics, to specific presentations, to authoritative documents and information. And the idea is that these topics could be exposed throughout your regular course of work. So whether someone mentions the name of a topic in an Outlook email, in a Teams chat, in a SharePoint document, in a Word file, you'll be able to hover over it and get more context pretty quickly. Especially helpful for large companies that have, a million acronyms that takes about a year for any new hire to get acquainted with. So it's a pretty cool tool. And there's new metrics coming out in terms of how are people adopting it, how much use are you getting out of this across the board, because this is so far reaching in so many different ways of interacting with it. It's more than just looking at your web analytics for those pages. It's actually looking at, how many people are getting, the benefit and how many people are hovering over that and clicking into it. Related to what I just mentioned, so they are releasing Viva Topics in the Outlook desktop client. So as you see here on the right side, there will be an optional panel if you have Viva Topics enabled in your environment to be able to go and see, okay, if there's topics being referenced in this email, let's put some more context behind it. Is the email that you're getting someone that's an authoritative expert on that topic, which you'd see their name appear on the right side, or is this someone that, was referred to something that you might not be aware of and you want to learn more at a glance? Viva Goals. So Viva Goals is another tool, part of the Viva set, and Viva Goals is your platform to manage your OKRs. So your objectives and key results across your organization. OKRs are a concept of tracking corporate progress that was been around for at least 20 or more years. And there's various tools on the market that basically implement that methodology into technology, right? And Microsoft acquired a company called Ally.io about a year ago, and they've integrated that within the stack and they've rebranded it as Viva Goals. So if you haven't seen a demo of Viva Goals, I would highly suggest it. It's a very, although it's new to Microsoft, it's a fairly mature tool in the marketplace. That being said, Microsoft continues to tie it into the other products within the suite. So the latest is integration with Planner. So if we have, let's say, tasks tied to a goal that says we have to go accomplish X, Y, Z, you can now interact and mark it as complete or track your progress within the other tools that you're accustomed to using, whether it's Planner directly or Planner tab inside of a Teams channel, and so forth. People in Microsoft Viva. So Microsoft is continuing to enhance their org chart components that have been there for a while. And now when you go into an org chart, not only can you see the reporting structure, you can also see what goals people are tied back to. So if you're looking to see, okay, who in the marketing department is aligned with this corporate goal of, increasing viewership to our webinars, at a glance, you'll be able to go in there and select which goals they're assigned to. And that way, you know the right people to find with that next level of granularity. Same thing applies with Viva Topics in this scenario. So if I'm looking at the IT department and saying, okay, who's an expert in Unix? Using that topics feature, I'd be able to drill down there and see who's been deemed as a person that I should go talk to if I have a Unix question. So a lot of great stuff coming in. As you're seeing more and more of this stuff, you're also seeing how more and more of these different technologies are being tied together to make life easier in the context of what you're doing. Yes, Doug?
So is that integrating with, when you go to Delve and you do your profile, you've got all the skills, which of course go into the SharePoint metadata, managed metadata. Is that pulling that out and connecting to that, or is that not totally
Yeah, what's the
separate?
difference between skills and goals? Like, is there?
Yeah.
Well, goals are goals that you have to reach versus skills are the things that I can do.
So skills in Delve are a carryover of the old user profile service in SharePoint.
Yeah.
So all that's stored in the user profile store as part of SharePoint. And it's exposed through people search in general.
Okay.
This is taking a bit of a different approach. So this is taking the org chart components that you had as part of the modern flyouts, as part of within Teams, and it's expanding that further. Now the question is, does this tie back to the Delve profile skills that you might have added? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think when this comes out, we'll be able to go and cross-check that. But Eric, to answer your question, so team goals, this is tied to Viva Goals, which is like your OKRs. So this is like, what is our company objectives for this year? And then you kind of break that down and assign it to tasks. Whereas the skills in your profile is more of, I know Photoshop.
We have one chat.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, anyone know if that contact card is edible beyond adding profile fields?
Great question. So this feature is not yet released, so we don't know. I can tell you that the current profile cards are not extendable. Aside from adding additional fields, and even when you add the additional fields, there's no way to get them to appear on the primary card. You actually have to click into it a few clicks to get there. Question. All right, so another app that's coming out is the Viva Pulse app. So Viva Pulse is a tool that will allow managers and team leads to be able to just get a sense of how their team is doing. Now, traditionally, you'd have your one-on-ones and you could talk about things, but you might look at this and say, okay, I want to know how the team feels about our new, return to the office policy. Or I have a quick question in terms of, are we meeting often enough or what have you. But instead of having to write your own questions, there's actually going to be a predefined library of questions that you can ask just to get a pulse on how your team's doing. Do you have people that feel like they're overwhelmed, feel like they're falling behind on work, feeling like there's other things that could be done from an organization to help support them and help them out. So this is going to be a tool that's going to be coming fairly soon. And I think it's going to be a pretty nice way to quickly get a pulse without having to do a whole lot of work to collect feedback.
Microsoft added another survey tool to the stack. All right. So I can do forms, pulse, or
And polls.
SharePoint list, or info path.
So I think
Info path, come on. Not
I'm just testing, just seeing who knows info path.
the differentiating thing here is that these are going to have like predefined templates. So you don't have to brainstorm your own feedback questions to ask and how to measure it. It's going to be pretty standardized. All right, another tool coming is Viva Amplify. And I just realized the video to the right is not Viva Amplify, so ignore the video. But this is a tool to help organizations that have communications departments help plan their release schedules. So, if you're in a comms department or a marketing department, you're going to have certain days where you're going to be launching press releases, doing website updates, social media engagement. And usually a lot of those tie back to having, drafts and reviews and legal reviews in some cases and so forth. So Viva Amplify is a tool that's rolling out that will just help manage the calendars for comms departments. And that's all it does. It doesn't actually, you don't do anything. It doesn't tie into your social media to go and post things out of, but it helps keep people on the same page. You can color code the elements. It's something that I think has the potential.
You use as an intranet topic driver?
So it's basically it's a closed inside only. So you have to be assigned to like a given workspace inside of the Amplify. So it's not intended to be like distributed publicly inside the company. It's more like a collaboration space.
Okay. But you could use that to drive the planning for the intranet.
Yes. Exactly. Like to your point, if you're like launching different departments on different dates, or if you have certain key things that you want to communicate on the internet.
Introducing M&As.
Yeah, great use case.
For new departments.
Okay, so Bill touched on this one in the initial opening slides. The one thing I wanted to add here is that in addition to having a new facelift, there's also this new activity column that shows you why this document is appearing on your list. So it could be that you were mentioned in the file. It could be that you recently made a change to the file. It could be that somebody shared a file with you. So that alone, I think, will be helpful, especially because I tend to get a lot of emails, and if I don't have something in one place to see, or people are reaching out to me for comments, makes it a little bit challenging to track it back.
Can I ask a quick question about OneDrive? How many people have end users who never look at the web version of OneDrive and only deal with the folder structure and File Explorer? Because that's been my experience.
I'm one of them.
They can do all this they want, they just don't like the web version.
Is going to bring that to the Outlook, the OneDrive client.
We'll talk about that in just a minute, but I think what we're seeing is that it also depends on employees' age and generation in general.
Yeah.
A lot of the younger employees, they don't want anything on their computers. They want to do everything in the browser. They prefer Word Online over the full Word client. They prefer Outlook in the browser. I don't get it. But there's a whole generation that, what's an app, right?
Yeah.
What's a PC? So I think this is probably going to be more used by that group in general. But it's also good elements to include in your training to say, hey, you know, you're constantly getting pinged for files. Here's one place you can go, and you already have the icon. Just click on it and click open in browser, and you're good to go. So the next feature here is the enhanced views in OneDrive. So similar to what we talked about before, this is really when you click the shared link in the left navigation in OneDrive. And one of the coolest features here is that it's going to show you things that were presented in meetings that you've attended. So if you were to filter into that meetings tab at the top, I can now go back and see where people have shared stuff with me. Of course, you know, I need to have access to the source material, be it SharePoint, Team, OneDrive, etc. But I think this is super helpful because I can't tell you how many times I've been in a great presentation and like a month later I'm like, oh, I know just the slide I need, and then trying to track back where that was is impossible. This would give me just a one-click, let me open up these 20 and see which one has it, which will be a lifesaver. But it also gives you the ability to filter stuff by person, things that I've shared out, things that have been shared with me. So I'm welcoming this feature, and this one's coming out this quarter. All right, Project Nucleus, or Nucleus. Oops, Nucleus. Is that how you spell it? Anyways, so Microsoft is giving us an offline syncable version of the web interface for OneDrive, likely SharePoint. So let's say you're going on somewhere offline, you're on a long flight that does not have Wi-Fi, but you need to do more than just make changes to files. You need to update calendars in the SharePoint, say, or OneDrive. You need to make list changes, metadata changes, etc. There's no way you can do that today, right? This will give you the ability to basically take that full interface with you on the go, and then when you reestablish Wi-Fi, it'll go back and sync up the changes just like it syncs file changes today. This is going to be available in the second half of this year. But this has been, in development for a while. I'd be very curious to see how it works when we get our hands on it.
It's gonna be interesting when you get two people making those changes. You're like, that's a good problem.
Well, just like in OneDrive with Word files today, you still have conflict resolution, right? When you go to sync, it says there's a conflict, you pick which value to keep.
It's inconsistent when it comes up when you have a conflict resolution. I always tell people, oh, it's gonna give the option to merge, and then it doesn't. Yeah.
Another thing that's coming is sharing usability. So a lot of end users struggle with that share icon, and they just end up picking the first option that's there because the choices aren't really clear, and no one wants to go dig in the documentation. So Microsoft is adding a lot more text, and they're redesigning this share icon so that you get a better sense of what you're actually doing when you click that share button.
Not as far as like the default, like my order of SharePoint site now, I have a default to specific people if I'm using the SharePoint site for a community, a group of people. If I'm using it as a file share, then I'll leave that, specify anybody.
Yeah.
But there's no tenant-wide setting to turn that, change that default, I don't think.
So SharePoint Online Admin Center has sharing defaults as an option. I forget how granular it gets.
They did something in our environment in the last few months where now it defaults to just choosing to share with people who already have access instead of it doing a breaking inheritance, because we're doing a bunch of classic to modern migrations, and sharing links are the bane of my existence.
And for those
that were created because people hit the share button and it broke inheritance. And they were giving people read access who already had read access.
It's a blast when you got to do compliance on a site.
And for those unfamiliar with the shareable links, as they're called, on SharePoint and OneDrive basically have two separate and parallel permission models. So you have your classic permission model, which is, if you're a long time user of SharePoint, you're familiar with. You break the inheritance on an object and so forth. Then you have the separate thing called shareable links that doesn't really pay attention to what you did on the left side. If you share a link with somebody, they get access via that link, even if they don't have access to the underlying permissions in the legacy way of doing it. So to Deb's point, that creates a bit of a mess, and I'll leave it at that. So another cool feature coming with Microsoft Word is there's a new permission that's called Can Review. So it lets people make changes with track changes enabled, and then it sends it back to the original author to either accept them, reject them, and actually update the file itself. So with this feature, you no longer have to send files and then wonder what people changed, if they changed anything, and then try to like do a comparison inside Word between two versions, which is always a fun time. So pretty cool. I'm definitely looking forward to this. And
I've actually seen that in my tenant for a while now. And I'm kind of curious how that's going to compete with the Syntex option.
for e-signature.
Yeah, the Syntex one you talked about earlier about making Syntex to make comments called.
Oh, like annotations.
Text annotation.
Yeah. So the annotation is more designed if you're looking to, you don't have access to the source material to edit it, or you're trying to like draw things and get more creative. I think this is just your classic legal sense. You send a contract around and you need to see what changes were made. Moving forward, so Mac OS is getting some love. So the known folder move, where like your desktop and your documents are automatically synced into the cloud, but they appear as your desktop and documents right in your Mac Finder in this case. So we're definitely looking forward to this because this helps us prevent needing to deploy backup agents on a lot of laptops, because known folder move takes the most common places you store stuff and puts into your OneDrive. Another feature that came out recently, I think I have a typo on this slide, is the OneDrive Sync Help dashboard. So if you're not using this dashboard yet, I would highly recommend it. This allows you to see who in your organization is having challenges with OneDrive, whether it's sync failures or the last time that they've synced in general. And this lets you become a little bit more proactive when you reach out to them. Years ago, we were doing a migration project because the company was being split into two. And despite countless communications and workshops and everything else, we had one person that had a year's worth of work in their OneDrive, except their client didn't sync in over a year. And when the company split and they, wiped everyone's machines to re-enroll them in a new environment, they lost a lot of content, and they were not with the company much longer. But had this type of solution been in place at the time, this would give IT the power to look back and say, okay, these users have not synced in a while. Chances are the client's stuck. They need to re-sign in, re-authenticate, something's going on. Let's go and help them out before they actually lose business value. All right. So another feature coming out is the restrictive access control policy for SharePoint sites. So this is a feature that's going to be in the SharePoint Online Admin Center. And if you have a SharePoint site that's connected to a Microsoft 365 group, you can basically enforce it to have the same membership as that owners and members group. So you're not able to go and break inheritance and go and do things that you don't want people to be doing. So this is a pretty key feature to help, curb some of those shareable links, or at least find sites that you want to designate as being more critical that should not ever have any funny permissions. Be able to do that at scale. Another great feature that's coming is conditional access for SharePoint sites, OneDrives, and Teams. So for those that aren't familiar with conditional access, this is an Azure AD feature that lets you build business rules for who can have access into what applications. Not at the application level, but at the identity level. So if I'm logging in from, let's say, a company-controlled device, and I'm on my corporate network, maybe I don't need a second MFA prompt to go and hit my finance system. Maybe if I'm coming in from a personal device, I want to go and push an MFA each time. Or maybe if I'm on a personal device, I'm blocked from even trying to access that finance application well before the finance application makes a decision whether or not to give me access. So it's a very powerful tool. I think most companies that are serious about security have implemented conditional access, or a competitor of it if it's a different tech stack for identity. But the great feature here is that you can now get more granular. So previously you can block SharePoint if conditions are met, or you can block Teams, or you can block OneDrive. Now you can block individual sites. So let's say you have certain sites that have a sensitivity label on them that they're sensitive sites or confidential. You can now add additional policies that say, these sites people can only access if they're geolocated within, the US. Or if it's a personal device, we're okay if they want to access the corporate intranet, but we don't want them accessing to any collaboration sites. So you can now start to build more granular rules about who can do what inside the environment, instead of just treating the whole application as a whole one unit. Another awesome feature that's coming is having a default sensitivity label applied to a document library. So today you can apply a default retention label to a library, meaning any file uploaded gets a specific retention label, but there was no equivalent for sensitivity labels, meaning you'd still need the E5 features to go and apply sensitivity labels based on keyword search, trainable classifiers, the whole 9 yards. But now you can take a library within a site and designate that whatever people put in here, mark it as confidential or mark it as do not forward or what have you, and it'll automatically apply that upon upload. For those that have worked with sensitivity labels, this was a huge gap that prevented a lot of clients from going live with this. It's now available, or it's going to be available. It's being released. Another feature is around SharePoint data access governance insights. So we just talked about the DAG a few slides back about this ability to prevent people from doing stuff. This is the other side of it where you can actually go and run reports against the content that you already have to go and see what exists, what's out there, what needs some attention. Another feature that's coming is around site lifecycle policies. What do we do with inactive sites? Most companies have implemented some type of governance policy, hopefully, but this gives us a new tool to be able to go and enforce it. So, some clients have like the AvePoint suite around governance for SharePoint.
Oh, that's a super easy and incredibly simple thing to roll out that we just did.
Yeah. So they've been in that space for a while. Microsoft is taking some of those more basic features and including them as part of your existing subscriptions. Another pretty cool feature is, especially for environments that have multiple SharePoint admins, you can now go into a SharePoint site and see what administrative settings, features, tools, etc., have been changed on that site. It gives you a full picture. If it goes to you and says, hey, this was working great a month ago, you can then go back and see, okay, who was in there and what did they change?
Brony changed the permissions.
Yes. The SharePoint Admin Center. Site collection.
So the history is by site collection, but to access this, you come into the SharePoint admin interface.
I just have it yet.
They have not released dates on this one yet.
As usage.
Jesus.
Okay, moving forward to Microsoft Purview. So Microsoft Purview is the new kind of umbrella brand name of where most of the security and compliance features have been rolled into. And this one in particular deals with your retention labels and what happens when a file is set to be expired. Now, previously, you had a disposition review that you can configure, and there was one or two other options that you had. Now Microsoft is tying this into Power Automate. So now you can build workflows of any which kind that you want once a file reaches its end of life. So if you wanted to go and put on a tape backup using some third-party service, you have that ability. If you want to send it for 5 more levels of approval, you have the ability to do that. So this takes the very basic workflow that was previously available and actually makes, makes it something that has limitless options behind it. Microsoft Teams also has a new feature now where you can apply a retention label directly from the Files tab. So previously, to apply retention labels, you'd have to rely on the auto tagging that happens with your E5 license, or you'd have to go into the SharePoint library and then go select a retention label for each file. As a reminder, retention labels live within the storage mechanism of that file. So if it's in the SharePoint library, the retention label is the metadata on that document library. If someone downloads a file, that retention label does not follow the file. So this is super helpful because a lot of people now work primarily inside of Teams in the Files tab, and now you can access that additional labeling there. There's a lot of other updates coming on the information protection side. So this is your sensitivity labels. So they're making things a lot easier to be able to go and label things. If you take a look at the bottom picture on this one, you now have the ability to put icons and color coding different sensitivities. So you can do like a green light, red light system to help users at a glance and make sure that they're doing the right thing. There's a lot more coming with mobile co-authoring of encrypted documents. So once upon a time, if a document was encrypted, you needed to use like the full desktop client to make any changes. Microsoft is starting to expand that so that you can work more across different devices. And there's a bunch more things that are coming in here. Another great feature is with the Insider Risk Management feature. Has anyone used Insider Risk Management? Maybe just a show of hands. So Insider Risk Management, it's an O365 E5 feature. And this gives you the ability to identify behaviors by employees that are not with the best intentions. And we've all received alerts that, if someone has unusual activity, they've downloaded 40 files. But that's only getting you so far. This is really meant to detect employees that might be disgruntled, that are doing things like sending out emails to Gmail accounts, or taking documents and storing them on their computer or moving them to a thumb drive. Or if you know that somebody is being laid off or someone is about to be let go, you can start to put those controls around making sure they don't take data with them that they're not supposed to take. So previously, you can have a lot of these alerts based on certain activities. Now Microsoft is allowing you to string together multiple activities. So if someone downloads a file and then emails it to a personal address, or if someone takes an action where they change the file name, take a sensitivity label off, and then move it to a thumb drive. Now you're going to have more and more options to be able to track what people are doing, to get alerts for that, to block the activities, should you choose to, automatically, and help basically prevent the data leaks. So if you haven't explored this feature, please look into it. Of course, we help clients deploy these types of things all the time, but this is usually an overlooked feature that's pretty powerful. Moving forward, so contextual evidence for DLP policy matches. So let's say you have a DLP rule that gets triggered. If you really want to get back and identify why, what happened, right? You have your DLP policy in your Purview information protection area. Then you have to go into your M365 audit logs to go and see more context behind that email. Then you have to go in and understand what are the sensitive types that triggered it. And ultimately, you end up looking at 3 or 4 places to get the full picture for why did something get blocked, and is this a benign alert that we can ignore, or is someone trying to do something bad and we need to take action? So now Microsoft is giving you an easier place within the DLP module to go tie in all these data points. So you can click into an email that was blocked or alerted, and then see more information about what's going on, pulled from these other data sources. All right, so when we talked about Microsoft Purview, right, so this is the whole information management, policies, compliance, security, and kind of putting a layer on top of wherever your content is stored, whether it's in Exchange, and SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, elsewhere. And to help Purview have a better understanding of the relationship of the different content, you can now start to define your organizational hierarchy in terms of what are business activities, what are business decisions. Is it okay if the investment side of your finance company is talking to your brokerage side of the finance company? Chances are no. By helping to define and build the model of your company, this will allow more insights for Purview to start to determine what's considered normal, what's not normal, and then feed into their AI models when they're detecting behaviors. Again, this isn't released yet, so we haven't had hands-on experience to see exactly how it works, but it sounds pretty promising because every company is different, and some things that might be normal to one company might be completely abnormal to the next.
Like a map for information barriers.
Our platform. So one of the coolest features that I think came out with the Power Platform is the ability to co-author Power Platform like Power Apps and Power BI dashboards. Power Apps is what's being announced here. And this basically, gives you the ability where if you have more than one person working on the same app, you can do that. I know from experience, there have been times where something goes wrong and a couple of people jump on it to see why did it break, why didn't it function the right way. And previously, you had to export that, import it into a different environment, which introduces all sorts of change because the connections are different, et cetera. So this at least gives multiple people the ability to be in there at the same time, which I think is pretty cool. Power Pages is now generally available, and they've simplified the licensing model. So think of Power Pages like the ability to build external facing websites that tie into your backend data stores, right? So the idea is if you want to build a really slick appointment booking application on your website, would tie that into your free busy availability on the backend, or tie that into your CRM to see which salesperson might be available next to go meet with somebody. So this opens up the ability to do so instead of Charging with the old models, they're basically going with a more of a pay-as-you-go model. I'll give you another example here. Let's say you're an insurance company that has life insurance policies, and you need your customers to log in and authenticate with who they are, which they might want to authenticate with their Facebook ID, they want to authenticate with their Gmail, some other consumer-facing identity provider. But you want to be able to show them secure data that you're storing in your SQL database. Using Power Pages, you can now do so and allow them to authenticate successfully using their preferred mechanism of authentication. And you have the whole set of process to tie them into your backend data to make sure that there's a match. And then basically show them that kind of information without having to write much code. Actually, no code, it's a low-code platform. All right, moving on. So today, if you go into a SharePoint document library and let's say you have a Word file, a PowerPoint file, and a video file, clicking on each file is going to launch the corresponding web application for that file handler. So whether it's going to open the Word online, Excel online, whatever you have. But that wasn't the case with Power BI files. So if I uploaded a bunch of PBIX files into a document library, it would just be the option to download them. Microsoft is changing that now. Now you can actually go and view those as using Power BI as an app handler or file type handler in addition to its own service, which makes it a little bit easier to go and access reports that you might put in libraries.
Show me the report or the report that's been published to the service?
The report itself. So think back to like how SSRS would handle it back in the day with SQL Server reporting services, where you would upload the the file into the document library, you'd click into it, and it would launch that web application for that specific file. So you configured the data connections and everything else in that file in that library. So again, just more options for how to get into your data and how to expose it. We have a question from Mike Dixon. Yes, Mike.
Hey, doesn't this kind of drive a huge hole in Microsoft's Power BI licensing model?
Just you can only share it if it's an E5, or if you purchase an E3 with the extra boost.
Yeah, great question, Mike. So they haven't released this yet, and they haven't announced any licensing terms around this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how that will be impacted.
Thank you.
Yes, so if we take a step back from Power BI licensing, so as long as you have a Microsoft 365 tenant at any license level, you can create your own Power BI reports, dashboards, publish them into your workspace inside of the cloud service for Power BI. But the only caveat is that only you can access the content. If I share it to somebody else, it won't work. If I try to click into someone else's, it won't work, unless I have a license. Now, if I'm licensed for Power BI, which starts at roughly $10 a user a month, I can now share things out and I can go and access other people's content. But let's say you're a large organization and you need some critical reports that most employees should be able to access, but very few people will actually author them. You have another option, though, it's called a premium capacity, which starts at, I believe, $5K a month. In that case, you can have unlimited readers within your tenant, but your report builders and stuff would still need that $10 license. So there's different models in place. To Mike's point, how is that going to tie back into this specific feature? I'm not sure.
I think this feature probably, the data doesn't refresh. It's probably just how that report was saved. So this is the static version. I'm assuming it'll be the static version of that report, because you need to have that license for it to refresh or the service.
Very possible. So we'll see when Microsoft announces more. So moving forward, there's a bunch of updates coming to the AI builder around document processing. So there's new abilities with built-in feedback loops, which basically have you a better way of correcting when the AI builder when it gets something wrong. So today, if there's something that is being mistagged or misclassified, you would take those examples when you collect them, take them back to the builder to define the model, and you would train on those exceptions. But this gives you the ability to do it very tactically, specifically within a given thing that automatically then goes and updates the model. Make things a little bit easier. It can now handle unstructured documents. So that's a huge addition. There's some additional language support. And there's also the ability to extract tables that span multiple pages. So we all know how much of a pain it is if you're scanning and say a phone bill that spans 10 pages. Every page is treated as its own table and they have to merge them. And this at least now gives us one unified way of handling it. All right, another really exciting feature, which is being powered by AI, is when you go to build Power Automates in the near future, you'll be able to just type in what you want it to do, and it will go and it'll build out your Power Automate for you. You just open it up and you fill up your connections or fill in the blanks. So very powerful. So instead of having to dig through triggers and dig through activities and add them one by one or use a pre-built template, you can just dream what you want to do and let the AI builder build it for you. So another way that AI is taking away developer jobs. Another cool feature coming is the ability to format data by examples. So we've all been
Dimitri, I've used that feature. Your job is perfectly safe. Trust me.
So another cool feature is formatting data. So we've all been in that documentation hell where we're trying to figure out, do we need an uppercase D or a lowercase d to get the full month name and proper capitalization? And it usually takes a bunch of tries to get it just right. And no one likes doing it. So Microsoft now gives you the ability to take the source data and give an example of what the output should look like. And then it generates that formatting parameter for you. So you no longer have to remember if it's 3 uppercase Y's or 3 lowercase Y's to get the full 4-digit year of a given date. All right, moving on to Microsoft Teams. So this feature is coming out that I think is going to help a lot of companies, and this lets you define your work hours and your work location. So with this whole hybrid work that we're all facing these days, the value of coming into the office is often driven by who else is going to be in the office. And if you're going to have a key meeting, sometimes face-to-face meetings just work better, especially if you're whiteboarding or doing other tasks. But it doesn't really help if you schedule a meeting, you show up to the office, and the rest of your team's remote, or it's 50-50. And people on the phone are getting the second-class experience because they're not there. So being able to define what days and what times you'll be working from home or in the office will give you the ability when you're scheduling a meeting to basically pick dates and times that everyone will be in the office. So this is kind of the front end of it. On the back end, when you go to schedule a meeting, you have more options to pick. Show me the next availability when these 4 people are in the office at the same time. So this is going to be introduced through Teams with the ability to define it. But of course, it'll tie back to Outlook as well. And the last bullet point says that this will be in private preview by the end of the year. So this would have been at the end of the last year in private preview, which means depending on how much feedback they receive, it'll probably go to public preview and then general availability. No concrete timelines on those though. The next thing coming up is mesh avatars for Microsoft Teams. Has anyone submitted a request to join the private preview? No. I think it looks goofy on the front end, but I think there's going to be some value to it. And I'll tell you why. A lot of times people these days have multiple computer screens, and your camera is usually not dead center. So you're constantly seeing people like looking at one screen or looking at the other. And then it creates a lot of pressure of like, does my hair look good? Am I smiling? Am I making enough eye contact even though like I'm presenting material that's in another location? And ultimately, having these avatars can reduce that strain. It's gotten to the point where if I don't have to be on camera, I won't be on camera. That's what I do. It just makes life a little bit easier, but there's times where you actually do want to do it. So I think this will be a happy medium between the two options.
Does the avatar track you?
Yep, it tracks you pretty much in real time. If you smile, it smiles. If you, say
Does
hi.
it make more eye contact than I make?
So just to go off on a tangent, I don't know if anyone uses NVIDIA Studio. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can download this tool called NVIDIA Studio. And the initial intention was that it uses your graphics card's GPU to do noise canceling and also do a better job at removing the background if you're having a virtual background. It actually works pretty well. They've recently introduced a new feature in the latest beta where it simulates eye contact. So even if you're like looking a little bit off, your eyes are like dead center of the camera. I've tried it. I think my screen is a little too tall for where my webcam rests, so it looks very creepy.
Your eyes just stay in one spot, but your face moves.
I think if you move more than like 13 degrees, it cuts out, like it cancels the effect.
Saw the video.
It's just a zoom in of his eyes. That's all it is.
But it's interesting because I mean, companies are seeking ways to kind of see how you can start, looking at people as if you are in person, but actually looking at what you're presenting.
I already kind of look like an avatar.
So next feature is collaborative annotations inside of Teams meetings. So this ties a little bit back to what we were talking about before. And now inside of a Teams meeting, somebody can put up a document, a file, a visual, and then the people attending the meeting can get markers and basically, draw all over it. Now you could do some of this previously with using the whiteboard feature. Then you still have to manually take a screenshot of what you were presenting and then put that into the whiteboard canvas. Then people could draw on top of it. This essentially uses a similar technology, but saves you a few clicks and lets you in real time draw over or highlight things. There we go. All right, so Microsoft has also announced a new SKU for Microsoft Teams Premium. And Premium is a license add-on that you can optionally purchase that gives you more features inside of Teams. We'll talk about what a few of these features that are coming are. So the first is the meeting guides. And if you look at the top right corner here, if I'm going to create a new meeting, instead of just having the ability to create a live event or a meeting, I can now have predefined templates. So maybe if I'm creating a meeting that's going to be with a new prospective client, maybe I want to bypass the lobbies to make it easier for them to get in. Or maybe I want to put a specific splash screen on the welcome page so when they join, type in their name, it's company branded. So this now lets you select different templates for your different meeting controls, so you're not constantly manually setting that per meeting. The thing I just mentioned is the custom branding. So as you have this initial join screen where people can turn on their cameras, test out their audio. You can now have your company logo or their imagery behind it. So again, it just makes it look a little bit more polished. A few more features that are coming include watermarking. So let's say you're presenting something that's very confidential and you don't want people to take a screenshot and save it somewhere. This can now overlay their username across all of the content, so to make it easier to track down where it came from. It also gives you the option to do end-to-end encryption. So today, all of your Teams conversations, chats, video calls are encrypted between you and Microsoft. And Microsoft to Microsoft, it has its own internal encryptions and it's encrypted back to the end user. But let's say you're talking about nuclear secrets and you don't want anyone at Microsoft to ever be able to see what you're talking about. You can exchange encryption keys and basically have a secure point-to-point encrypted meeting with your stakeholders. And then there's also some additional features coming with sensitivity labels and how you can automate some of these aspects. Another really cool feature that I'm personally looking forward to is intelligent recaps of meetings. So you have an hour-long meeting during which tasks were assigned to all different people, and you didn't have a chance to attend the meeting because you're double booked. Well, this intelligent recap will tell you basically what went down in the meetings in terms of bullet points of the key notes out of the meeting, and it's going to create follow-up tasks that could be assigned to individuals and tracked with due dates. So, if you're ever running a meeting by yourself and you don't have a colleague to help take notes and take action items, this could be very helpful to be able to go and, lean into Microsoft AI to send out the meeting minutes, to make sure the agenda items are covered and so forth. And furthermore, you'd actually be able to click into these notes or these tasks and jump to the recording of the video so you could replay it back if you want more detail and context.
Is that based on the audio?
Yeah. And Chris Borlick talked about this about 2 months ago when we went to Microsoft for a day, thing, and I can't wait to see this. Because it already can pick out your voice because you're logged in. It recognizes you're logged in from your microphone, what your voice sounds like. So it's pretty easy to find you. I want to see how well it's going to do in the action items and then assigning those tasks. That's what I want to see.
Also dealing with accents, that'll be an
Yeah.
We have a lot of our meetings.
And then is it only just putting it into do, or is it putting it into a planner form?
Or is it just putting it in this note?
No, it's actually going to grab the tasks and put it somewhere. I'm just not sure if it's to do or planner.
Or a new spot?
Yeah, it could be a task list.
The internet says this is powered by ChatGPT. Do you know if you can turn this off so your data is not being sent to ChatGPT?
Great question. So ChatGPT is a product out of the OpenAI group. And Microsoft has invested 10 billion into that group recently.
Yeah.
And they have been working with them for a period of time now. So this is being sent to a third party. Microsoft basically have the servers in-house that are offline. Though that level of detail hasn't been released. And again, this is a premium feature. So
Premium, yeah.
you need to pay the license fee, which I don't recall off the top of my head, but it's not a small add-on.
No, it's not.
Right.
But there's more features that are coming here too. So when you're doing the video recording, it's automatically going to add chapters to the video. Part of that's going to be done in the audio, to your point. Part of that's going to be based on what's in the presentation, if it's a PowerPoint. They're also going to be adding little callouts in the video replay so that if your name is mentioned, you can quickly jump to those. So if you're playing it backwards or you're watching it again, or someone's talking about you and you're not in the meeting, you have that ability to pretty easily dive into it.
It'd be really cool if they figured out how to get rid of the need for meetings.
Well, email.
Yeah, no,
Get rid of the need for meetings. It's just all together. It's just,
Dimitri,
ChatGPT will talk to each other.
yeah, just let the chat
Oh,
box.
yeah, Avatar.
Sit back.
ChatGPT will talk to your avatar on ChatGPT.
do you know if the recording is still always gonna be tied to the one who hit record, or is that how it works today? It's in their personal storage for that versus like making it readily available?
So it depends.
Yeah.
Right now, there's 2 ways that you could record a meeting, or 2 ways to set up the meeting. If you go into a Teams channel and you create a new meeting from inside of there, that recording will be stored as part of that team. But if you go into your Outlook or you go into your Teams calendar and you schedule a meeting that way, then that's tied to you as the organizer.
Or you're just randomly on the call and somebody says hit record and then you hit record, then it's tied to you?
I believe so. I believe so.
Okay.
It used to be that you couldn't hit record unless you ran the meeting, but I recently thought I saw the ability for somebody else to start recording.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like sharing recordings, if it's broken up, like being able to kind of go back to that. I think
Everybody
management of that is.
Everybody can access it in the chat.
To clarify on that, it's anyone from the organizer's tenant can hit record.
Okay.
Yeah, and to your point though, let's say you want to go back and you want to watch a recap of a meeting. Trying to juggle video files is not a simple or fun task. The intention here is that you go back into Teams, you click into that meeting invite for when the meeting took place, and you'll see all of these details there. You'll see the recording, the transcription, and from there you could download a copy if you want to take it offline.
You can do that now.
Right. Moving forward, actually,
I always can.
another feature is live translations for captions. So many of you have probably seen the transcription feature being a default now when you start recording something. So the premium feature will be able to translate that. So if, let's say you're doing like a global town hall, and if I'm joining in from a country where I speak a different language, I'd be able to select to see the live captions in a different language. There's also the ability to do advanced webinars. So this will give you better things around like having a green room where you can queue up your content or your presenters. You can have better control over what the attendees are going to see, have better registration processes, better reminder emails, really enhancing on that webinar feature that you have available with just regular Teams. All right, Windows 10/11. So one of the new features coming is the ability to deliver a customized message with Autopilot. So for those unfamiliar with Autopilot, we now have the ability to pre-register a given laptop with Microsoft to say that we own this. And this is typically done from the manufacturer of the laptop. So let's say you buy Lenovo, you would have the Autopilot pre-registration take place before you even get the laptop. And that way, when you get the laptop shipped directly to your end user, they open it up for the first time. It's going to automatically go and download all of the policies, applications, install everything that's in your tenant that you've configured. So with that, the part of that first run experience, previously you didn't really have the ability to do much more than add your company logo and then go to log in. Now you can actually set more of a welcome message where if you wanted to give, this example, links out to other training resources, maybe a link out to your intranet, other content that would be very relevant beyond just the shortcuts you push out. This will be a good kind of, first face into the company, especially if you're doing like a remote hire. Another feature coming is remote help for Windows and Android. So most enterprises will have an RMM solution already in place, a remote monitoring and management tool. Log Me In is a pretty famous one. I think we've all used in the 90s and 2000s. But now this is going to be a native feature as part of Intune where you'll be able to go request remote help. This will allow you to connect an end user with someone in IT to go in and help take a look there. A feature that I'm pretty excited about is privileged management for endpoints. So if your users are on Windows 11, and let's say they want to perform an administrative function, maybe install a software or do a driver update, something that traditionally would require someone to enter your admin credentials into. They'll have the ability to request a one-time exception to be able to go and run that tool that IT can then approve or reject. So the intention being you're putting more power into the end users without having to have IT be the ones doing it, provided that IT approves it. So I think this will be very helpful, especially when you're looking at things like Intune enrollment, for example. If your company doesn't have Intune today and you want to enroll it, that requires a local admin permission. So things like this will be able to help just reduce IT overhead. They haven't released a ton of details exactly on the inner mechanics of how this works and whether you can pre-whitelist applications or things like that. But we're excited to learn more about this feature as it comes out this year. All right, so I think just on time. Stay in touch if you'd like to discuss anything that we've talked about here in more detail or anything else under the sun of M365 or Azure. Here's my contact info. Please do not hesitate to reach out. And thanks for your time today.
We have a call for speakers right now. We're looking for anybody that wants to come and speak. Full meeting, you can do a partial meeting. We're here to work with you. If you have any ideas, feel free to reach out. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own because we can't talk you through it or see if we can provide you with any help. But we do need to get some speakers for this year. And if you know anybody, or you could reach out to somebody and ask if they're willing, to come and speak, that'll be great. Upcoming events. So the upcoming events, the big one is the Microsoft Conference 365 in Las Vegas. So you got the European Collaboration Summit in Germany. Was it EdCon? Is that the one? And that's in Washington. And the Microsoft Inspired Partner Conference in July. Microsoft Power Platforms will be in Las Vegas, October. And Ignite's the big one in Seattle. We're waiting on. Is this going to be interesting? I don't know if they picked Seattle yet.
They haven't announced where it'll be yet.
That's going to be an interesting one to watch. I know Dimitri, a lot of people tend to go to that, right? Are we missing anything? Anything else anybody knows of? Any events?
Boston Code Camp is coming back, finally. It's been 3 years. I believe April 29th, but their website's not updated yet.
Keep an eye out for that.
Not helpful.
Boston Code Camp, all right.
But they're looking for sponsors, so.
Good. Anything else? All right, I updated this slide. This is the PNP community. If you go to pnpgithub.io, but these are great. They Microsoft simplified it, so they share a lot of the same day. Some of these events, every other Thursday, you get the Viva, the Microsoft. I tend to go on the Power Platform monthly call. The developer calls can get really techy. They can get right down to the Power App and the code, but there's everything in between. You can get more the high level and listen to Microsoft actually explain what's going on down to the developer. I really recommend joining some of these meetings if you have time. I always put them on my calendar as tentative. I tell people they can book time with me if I have something tentative. Don't worry, because if I have time, I go into these live. I like going into them live instead of the recording because you can see the chat. You can have a conversation. And if you get on some of these meetings early, you can have a dialogue. They usually end abruptly, I noticed. So if you get on early, that's the time to ask the questions, is what I've discovered. But great community calls.
Actually, there's one, they just talked about the premium teams. And I'm trying to figure out if it's Teams community or just Microsoft community. They've talked about Yammer, they've talked, and then it's once a month. Like you said, the chat is probably even more interesting than the actual presentation. So they are
I found them both interesting, but the chat's great.
Yeah.
All right. Additional resources, recurring events. So Women IT Pros, I believe these are all still very ADX and Power Hour. Related user groups. So I checked some of these user groups. The Rhode Island one, they have a meeting coming up in March. Granite State, I haven't seen any.
It's getting restarted. So I had a conversation with Dan Bergeron from Skyterra today. and he's being asked to co-run it, and it looks like it's probably gonna be on-site at Skyterra a good chunk of the time, because they
Which one?
actually, Granite State.
Granite State, okay.
I'll let you guys all, as soon as I find out like the first meeting, I'll send you guys a blast.
Excellent. Yeah, I didn't see a date on Granite State yet. Rhode Island has a date coming up, March 7th. The Boston Azure Group, the North Boston Azure Cloud User Group, they're co-hosting a meeting on the 28th, so it's the same one. Sometimes they'll do different, sometimes they'll co-host together. They tend to have different locations if you want to be in person. Take a look at their sites to find out the details. Boston Power Apps, Power Automate User Group, I haven't seen details on that one yet. All right, this is the time we kind of open up the floor. Any problems or tips? We keep the recording going on this one to give it to people online. Any tips or questions in the room?
I have to say from last month's session, the list formatting, I've already used it and have like thrown away all of my notes about Power Apps because I'm like, oh, I can just put it all over here. It's been a huge help to kind of show how to kind of find that middle ground between SharePoint and Power Apps.
I like it. I think Power Apps has a much larger learning curve and you dedicate more time.
There's like 20 settings you have to know for each of the things. That's the problem.
The list formatting, I like that. I like how he presented it, and I love how you can turn everything off and get it very simple, just down to the data. Just put that in a web part. So I've been playing with that part of it. And if you go through his video, what I focused in on was turning everything off and just getting very simple text. And then I, expose some of this text. I found that really valuable. You almost could do a whole presentation just on that part of it.
Yeah, the conditional fields made it so we could have 50 different fields for different types of project questions, but we only see the 4 that apply for each project. So it makes it super easy to keep a list clean.
Okay. Tips in the room or questions people might have?
I have a question about guest users. As you know, so 4 years of me struggling with guest users, we're getting them under control. We're trying to open up and make it easier to do external collaboration without giving away the store, right? So one of the things that we've done in SharePoint sites, we give guest users access. We make a custom permission called contribute, no delete, because we don't want people deleting content. I cannot tell you how many stories I've heard where you've had a guest user come in and they accidentally delete something and nobody realizes it until many months later, and then you got to get back up. So we prefer to prevent that. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way for us to set some sort of a global policy where we can say if you're a guest account, you can't delete. Is there some way of using a Purview policy to be able to set that up? Oh, nice.
Hey, you can set alerts. So you can
That's
set
what I've heard, yeah.
alerts if the file gets deleted.
Yeah.
Then you could likely add some conditions of it being external.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no great way to prevent it.
I can tell you that, those Microsoft sharing features, you tend not to want to create a new one. Microsoft ties the UI to the ones that are there.
Mhm.
So you can edit what's in place, but on-prem in the olden days, it was, copy the permission group and then tweak it. Now in the cloud, it's kind of like work with what's there. I found when you QA test it, there's different scenarios. If you create a new group, then use the one in place.
Okay, we've been creating an external we do a SharePoint user group, put the SharePoint permission group, put them in there, put the contributor delete on that library. We put multiple libraries in the same site so that different clients can come in and the end users internally have one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
But we really would love to open up teams and start to actually do teams. And the other challenge I'm looking at now are the private channels. We had turned them off because they would disappear. You could never find them in the admin portal. Now you can see them, but I still can't go in there to add the accounts that I need to add to be able to run compliance reporting. And how do I make sure I can back those sites up? I need to be able to add an account to be able to back those sites up, and you can't. I was trying today. I can't break them. I can't get in there to add those groups as admins to the SharePoint site.
Yeah, so with
can't turn it on.
private channels, even if you do change the permissions, there's a nightly job that will go in and do it. And private groups were intended, private channels rather, they're intended to be a subset of people that had access to the team.
Which is what I want to do. So what I want to do is create one team for all the external collaborators to be able to come in, maybe ignore the general channel, have a channel for each one of these external collaborations. So you have them all there, and then you segregate them by the different private channels. It just doesn't look like that's gonna fly.
I mean, they'll be able to see each other, because they'll be able to see who's part of the team.
They can see each other as part of the team, but they won't be able to see the content. It's the content that's more important. But I'm trying to make it easier for the end user to have one user face, one-stop shopping to find things, because the biggest complaint I get is I can't find anything. I'm trying to find, reduce the number of sites I have,
Yeah, that would be me. So I'm currently working on a flow that creates a new SharePoint list and then adds people to the it creates a new SharePoint site and then customizes the permissions for that. It's the customizing the permissions for the newly created site where I'm running into tons of problems where it says the main error that I'm getting is cannot find resource for the requested user. And the only thing that I'm finding online is people talking about something called the user information list and something about how if the users never hit the list that SharePoint uses to look up for the user is somehow internal to that list. And thereby, if the users never hit that site, they won't be on it.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't really understand what's going on there. And I'm really curious if you guys have any tips for how to get this to work.
Yeah, so Mike, this is Dimitri. Few ideas there. So one is when you go to create a SharePoint site, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. So now all of the APIs might be immediately available. Maybe sleep it for like a few minutes and try it again. That's one idea.
User information list isn't created yet.
Right.
So he's trying to act on something that's just nucleated.
Exactly. So
Okay.
the other part is also to take a look at, I forget what they call it now, site design templates, I want to say. It's basically like an XML definition for a site of what changes to take place after the site is provisioned. I don't know if you could hook that into Power Automate, but it might be worth exploring.
Because Microsoft's already thought through those issues.
Right.
And that will provision it even if it gets delayed. I've had to, when I create a new list, index that list in order for me to access it with Power BI or Power Apps. So whenever I create new objects, I tend to go index, especially when it's a document library, because it has to go through the graph. And so, yeah, I run into that a lot. Any other questions? Room?
All right.
Okay. All right, we'll move on then. We'll also have a social hour afterwards too, if you don't want to ask on the recording. Huge thanks to Turn Digital, our platinum sponsor for the food tonight and this. Hopefully those of you online can join us next time.